Right then, Hollywood loves selling you a story. They want you to remember the glamour, the bright lights and the catchy tunes of the 1960s. They want you to think of the Monkees as those four lovable lads in the wool hats, skipping down the street, singing about being believers. Grand. A lovely image. But the real story, the one with the absolute carry-on and the absolute state of it, is how those four puppets cut their own strings, strangled their creators with them, and then set fire to the theatre. Come here to me, and I'll tell you about the film that didn't just flop. It was a suicide note written in neon and acid. The arrogance of the studio system thought they could package the revolution. Instead, they paid for their own funeral. Here's the thing. To understand the absolute hames that was the movie Head, ye have to understand the specific type of madness that was the Hollywood studio system in the late 1960s. It was a rotting empire. The old moguls were dying out, and the suits running the show were terrified. The world was changing fast. 1968 wasn't just a year. It was a grenade thrown into a crowded room. You had the Vietnam War turning into a slaughterhouse. You had riots in the streets. You had the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy. The air was thick with smoke and tear gas. And in the middle of this apocalypse, Columbia Pictures and their TV arm, Screen Gems, were sitting in their ivory towers counting money from a show about a fake band living in a beach house. The Monkees were the ultimate product of the studio system's arrogance. They were the prefab four. A band cast from a trade ad. Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Michael Nesmith and Peter Tork weren't a band that formed in a garage. They were employees. They were cast to play the role of a band. And it worked. By 1967, they were shifting more units than the Beatles and the Rolling Stones combined. They were God. Or at least, the studio thought they were. The executives looked at the balance sheets and thought they had cracked the code. They thought they could manufacture cool on an assembly line. But here is where the notions creep in. The lads, the product, they were real people. And they were miserable. Well, maybe not miserable, but they were chemically imbalanced and artistically frustrated. They were constantly being told they were fakes. The serious music press hated them. The hippies on the Sunset Strip laughed at them. They were the uncoolest cool people on earth. And it ate away at them. Especially Nesmith and Tork, who were actual musicians. They fought the suits. They fought for the right to play their own instruments. And they won. They released Headquarters, a #1 album they played on themselves. So, they had the money, they had the fame, and they had a tiny sliver of creative control. But that wasn't enough. They wanted to destroy the myth. They wanted to take a sledgehammer to the monkey image that had made them rich. And because the studio was so arrogant, so convinced that anything with the Monkees logo on it would turn to gold, they handed the inmates the keys to the asylum. The plan was this. The TV show was cancelled. The studio wanted a feature film to squeeze the last few drops of milk out of the cash cow. They wanted A Hard Day's Night, a fun, zany romp where the boys chase girls and sing hits. A 90-minute commercial. On paper, you couldn't fault it. A guaranteed hit. A budget big enough to choke a donkey, nearly $800,000, which was serious walking around money in 1968. But the lads didn't want a romp, they wanted an exorcism. Enter Bob Rafelson. He was one of the creators of the TV show, but he was a man with dangerous ambitions. He didn't want to make TV, he wanted to make art. He wanted to break cinema. And he brought along a friend of his. A struggling, unemployed B-movie actor and writer with a shark's grin and a head full of dangerous ideas. A fella by the name of Jack Nicholson. Yes, that Jack Nicholson. Before he was the icon in the sunglasses, he was just a guy hanging around the fringes looking for a break. He was hired to write the script. Now, I use the word script in the loosest possible sense. This wasn't a screenplay, it was a fever dream. To write this yoke, Rafelson, Nicholson and the four Monkees went to a resort in Ojai, California. They brought a tape recorder, a supply of herbal refreshments, large enough to sedate a horse, and they just talked. For days. They ranted, they raved. They talked about how much they hated the studio, how much they hated the show, how much they hated being puppets. They talked about the war, about God, about suicide. And Nicholson, the gombeen that he is, recorded it all. He took those tapes, the sounds of four men having a collective nervous breakdown, and he turned it into a movie. The studio executives must have been away with the fairies when they greenlit this. Or maybe they were just so blinded by the arrogance of the system that they didn't even read it. Oh, the Monkees are in it. Grand. Here's a check. They didn't realise they were funding a weapon designed to blow up their own bank vault. Filming began, and it was an absolute hames from day one. The working title was Changes. Then it was untitled. Then, finally, Head. Why Head? So that if the movie was a sequel, they could call it Head 2. Ah well, yeah, that's the level of maturity we're dealing with here. The movie doesn't have a plot. It has a vibe. A bad vibe. It opens with the mayor of a city cutting a ribbon at a bridge dedication. The microphone malfunctions, a symbol of the breakdown of communication, if you want to get fancy about it. Then, the Monkees, running away from something, interrupt the ceremony. They run to the edge of the bridge and they jump. The first image of the band in the film is them committing suicide, slow motion, plunging into the water, and then the music starts. Pauper's song. It's a beautiful, haunting, psychedelic dirge. Goodbye, 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 the voices sing. The water turns into a kaleidoscope of solarized colours. It's trippy, it's gorgeous, and it's deeply, deeply depressing. This was the opening handshake with the audience. Hello, we're the Monkees, and we're dead. From there, the film becomes a stream of consciousness nightmare. It's like channel surfing on a TV that's been electrocuted. The Monkees are thrust into different genres, different realities, and in every single one of them, they are the victims. There's a war movie sequence, a trench in World War I. The boys are charging over the top, getting mowed down. It's violent, it's chaotic. And suddenly, the football player Ray Nitschke tackles Peter Tork. Why? Because acting the maggot. That's why. It makes no sense. It's mocking the very concept of narrative. Then there's the boxing match. This is where the arrogance of the studio meets the reality of pain. They cast Sonny Liston, the former heavyweight champion of the world, a man who could punch through a brick wall. And they put him in the ring with Davy Jones. Little Davy Jones, the teen heartthrob who stood about 5'3" in his socks. The script called for Davy to get beaten up, and Liston, being a professional fighter and not an actor, didn't really know how to pull his punches. He walloped him. In the film, when you see Davy Jones looking terrified and getting battered, that's not acting. That's a man realising he's made a terrible mistake. It was pure devilment. The band was literally getting beaten up by their own movie. But the real darkness, the stuff that makes ye stop the lights and wonder how this ever got past the censors, was the Vietnam footage. Remember, this is 1968, the war is raging. It's on the news every night, the studio wants a fun musical, and what does Raffleson and Nicholson put in the movie? There is a scene where the Monkees are performing a concert, the girls are screaming, the mania is at its peak, it's the image of success. And then, abruptly, violently, the film cuts to the footage of the execution of Nguyen Van Lem. The famous clip of the Viet Cong prisoner being shot in the head at point blank range in the streets of Saigon. A real man dying a real death. And then, snap, back to the screaming girls. It was a slap in the face. No, it was a punch to the gut. It was the band screaming at their audience. How can you care about us? How can you scream for pop music when the world is burning? It was an act of hostility towards the very people who paid their wages. It was the studio system's arrogance turned inside out. They thought they could distract the youth from the war, and instead, the product forced them to look at it. The film is full of these jarring moments. There's a scene where the band are dandruff flakes in a giant's hair. The giant is played by Victor Mature, an old Hollywood star. He's the establishment. He's the old studio system. And the Monkees are just pests living on his scalp. It's not subtle. It's a direct insult to their bosses. Then there's the factory scene. This is the thesis statement of the whole yoke. The Monkees are shown as mannequins, lifeless dummies being assembled on a conveyor belt. They are poked, prodded, and packaged. It's a sterile, industrial nightmare. It's the band admitting, we are products, we are fake. And then at the end of the film, they are sealed into a giant black box, a tank, and it's driven off the pier. The film ends where it began, underwater, drowning, trapped in their own image. The production was a circus, an absolute circus. Raffleson was a tyrant on set. He was trying to break the band psychologically to get the performances he wanted. He kept them off balance. He kept them confused. And the Monkees, desperate to be taken seriously as artists, went along with it. They thought they were making their Citizen Kane. They thought this film would prove they weren't just pretty faces. They were heads of the ball, every one of them. When the film was finally finished, the executives at Columbia sat down to watch their investment. I would give my right arm to have been a fly on the wall in that screening room. They were expecting a hard day's night. They got a non-linear, avant-garde, suicidal freak-out featuring a boxing match, a dandruff commercial, and a public execution. Their faces must have been a picture. The silence must have been deafening. What in the name of God is this yoke? But here is where the arrogance of the studio system really shines. Instead of burying it, or recutting it, or trying to salvage it, they just froze. They had no idea what to do. They were dinosaurs looking at a spaceship. They didn't understand the language. So, the marketing department, in a moment of panic or perhaps malicious compliance, decided on the worst possible marketing strategy in the history of cinema. They decided not to market the Monkees. The poster for the film didn't have Mickey, Davey, Mike or Peter on it. It didn't have their names. It was just a black and white photo of a man's balding head, John Brockman, a philosopher friend of the production with the word head written on his forehead. That was it. No context. No, starring the Monkees. Just a greasy, balding head. They put stickers on mirrors in bathrooms across New York that just said head was slang for a drug user or, well, other things. It wasn't exactly screaming family fun movie. It was obscure. It was pretentious. It was an absolute dog's dinner of a campaign. The premiere was held in New York in November 1968. They didn't book a massive cinema. They booked a posh art house theatre. The audience was a mix of confused teeny boppers who had heard a rumour the Monkees were in town and cynical film critics who were ready to sharpen their knives. The lights went down. The bridge scene played. The suicide, the screaming, the war footage. The audience didn't just dislike it. They hated it. The teenagers were traumatised. They came to see their boyfriends and watched them get shot, drowned and humiliated. They left in tears. The critics, who usually hated the Monkees for being fake, were baffled. They admitted it was interesting, but dreadfully profound. The New York Times essentially asked why this movie existed. It bombed. Bomb is too kind a word. It evaporated. It made less than $20,000 in its opening run. To put that in perspective, the catering budget was probably higher than the box office gross. It was pulled from theatres almost immediately. The studio system had bet the farm on the idea that the brand was invincible. They learned the hard way that if ye take a brand and set it on fire, people tend to stop buying it. Was it bad luck? Get away out of that. It was inevitable. The film was designed to fail. It was a kamikaze mission. The Monkees destroyed themselves. Peter Tork, who had been the heart of the film's philosophy, was the first to go. The stress, the failure, and the sheer exhaustion broke him. He bought out his contract, paid the studio to let him leave, and vanished. He went from being a world-famous pop star to a waiter in a matter of months. The band limped on as a trio for a bit, but the magic was dead. Head had killed it. It had exposed the wires. It had shown the audience the man behind the curtain, and the man was screaming. But here is the twist in the tale. The synthesis of this whole sorry saga. As me old fella used to say, there's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes. The movie was a disaster in 1968 because it was wearing the wrong clothes. It was marketed as a pop movie, but it was an art film. Looking back now, with the benefit of hindsight and a few pints, Head is actually brilliant. Stop the lights, I know what I said. But it is. It captures the spirit of 1968 better than almost anything else. It captures the confusion, the feeling that the old world is dying but the new world hasn't been born yet. It's a visual masterpiece. Raffleson used solarization, rapid editing, and sound collages that were years ahead of their time. And the legacy? Well, this absolute hames of a movie was the seed for the new Hollywood. Bob Raffleson and Bert Schneider, the producers, took the money they made from the Monkees before the movie flopped and formed BBS Productions. And what did BBS Productions do? They gave the money to Dennis Hopper to make Easy Rider. That's the irony. The Monkees, the ultimate fake band, the symbol of the studio system's commercialism, funded the movie that finally killed the studio system. Easy Rider was the revolution that Head tried to be. So, the 1960s focused the arrogance of the dying studio system is perfectly encapsulated here. Columbia Pictures thought they could own the youth culture. They thought they could buy it, package it, and sell it back to the kids at a profit. They didn't realise that the youth culture was a wild animal. If you try to cage it, it will bite you. And if you give it a camera and a budget, it will film itself burning down your house. Head was a monument to pure egotree, yes. But it was brave egotree. It was 4 young men realising they were trapped in a golden cage and deciding that the only way out was to blow up the cage, even if they were still inside it. The studio lost their money. The band lost their careers. But for 90 minutes, they told the truth. And in Hollywood, telling the truth is the most dangerous stunt of all. So now you know the real story. It wasn't a movie, it was a crime scene. A fascinating, colourful, musical crime scene where the victims were also the perpetrators. And if you ever watch it for the Porpoise song. It's the sound of a dream dying, and it's beautiful. Right, I'm off. Slán